Hello, Roncalli scholars. Today, the pre-recorded lecture is going to walk you through the 5 different types of epithelial tissues that we will cover, both in class and in the lab. Okay, and as you work on your individual slides, you can begin making edits to those slides. You can begin having a better understanding of the pictures that we're using here and what you're seeing underneath the microscope. Okay. First, a few general vocabulary terms that pertain to epithelial tissues only. Okay. Number one, I'm going to pause here for a second to let you get a notebook. This is going to end up being about a page worth of notes. So you'll want to pause, make sure that you have a notebook out and ready. Okay. First of all, simple means one layer. In terms of epithelial anatomy, there are some tissues, epithelial tissues, that have one layer of cells. Stratified means many layers, like the layers of the skin are stratified. Those cells come in numerous layers. The word squamous means flat. Cuboidal means cube-shaped. And columnar means columnar-shaped. Simple, one layer. Stratified, many layers. Squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. Tells you about the shape of the epithelial cell. If you put these words together, you can make all 5 of the epithelial tissues that we're going to cover. All right. So this is a schematic diagram. I'm on page 49 of your lecture slides, the histology lecture slides. And this shows a schematic diagram of the epithelial tissue, where these are one layer of flattened cells. We see 3 squamous epithelial cells. This is our simple squamous epithelial tissue. The lumen, or the free surface, would be over here. These smears right here would be the basement membrane that those cells are anchored to, and the connective tissue below. This is a schematic diagram of simple cuboidal cells. Notice how these have those cube-shaped cells, one layer of cube-shaped cells, lumen, the empty space over here, basement membrane, down here the smeary stuff where the cells are anchored to the connective tissue below. Simple cuboidal epithelium. This is simple columnar epithelium. Notice how the cells are columnar shaped, nice round nuclei here at the bottom, anchored to a basement membrane, which fastens the cells to the connective tissue below. And up here we've got lumen. We'll talk about goblet cell in a minute, but that's a mucus secreting cell, those goblet cells. Okay. This type of epithelial tissue is called pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. Now, it looks like we have many layers of cells, but no, actually, all of these cells touch the basement membrane. So this is really only one layer of cells. It's just these little guys here have to grow up and reach the free surface. One hallmark of pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium is the cilia. Okay. These are the types of cells that are found in your trachea, and those cilia in the trachea help whisk away any debris trapped in the mucus. Okay, so we have lumen out here, pseudo-stratified columnar epithelial cells, basement membrane down here, and below that is the connective tissue. This is stratified squamous epithelium of the skin. Notice there are many layers of cells, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 layers of cells in this schematic diagram. Okay. Flat cells at the top, a little bit more cube shape at the bottom, but this is stratified squamous epithelial tissue found at the skin, anchored to the basement membrane, connective tissue below. I don't like how this diagram uses cuboidal shaped cells here because it can be misleading. This is simple squamous epithelial tissue. All right. This is a histological diagram. So this is a real slide of simple squamous epithelial cells. This is lung tissue, where this is the open alveolus right here. This is the lumen. Okay. And then around the edge of the lumen, we are looking at the simple squamous epithelial cells. There's a nucleus, there's a nucleus, there's a nucleus. And let me back up, shoot. And look how thin and flat those cells are. These are simple squamous epithelial cells in the lungs. There's the surface of one of those alveoli. This is simple squamous epithelium in the kidney. All around the edge of this lumen, it's lined with these super thin cells. Super thin, simple squamous cells. Because the kidneys are filtering out, filtering our blood, producing urine. And that filtration happens at these structures here. This thing is called this little lump in here is called a glomerulus. You don't need to know that for the test. It'll come up later. And then this outer rim is called the Bowman's capsule. But this is where urine is being produced and collected in the cellular structures of the kidney. Simple squamous epithelium. Okay. The structure of simple squamous is a single layer of very thin, very flat cells. And its function is to allow for diffusion in the lungs and filtration in the kidneys. When you are doing your slides, be sure that you specify diffusion in the lungs and filtration in the kidneys. Okay? In the lungs, those cells are permeable to oxygen and carbon dioxide, where gas exchange is occurring. And in the kidney, where blood is being filtered and urine is being produced. Locations for simple squamous would be the linings of the blood vessels, gas exchange surfaces, the alveoli of the lungs and the capillaries, and kidneys. Those are the best places to find simple squamous epithelium. Here are diagrams of simple cuboidal epithelium. Notice this little box surrounding one of the simple cuboidal cells. Notice there's a single line of these cuboidal cells. The thing about simple cuboidal cells is the nucleus is often very round, surrounded by that cube-shaped cell. This is the lumen, the inside of that tube, and these are one of the collecting tubes in the kidneys where that urine is collected and either water is removed or water is secreted into that urine, depending on your state of hydration and the state of the electrolytes in your blood. This is the thyroid gland, where, once again, a gland is responsible for secretion. These cells secrete product into the lumen here. This lumen isn't completely clear, but it's filled up with material produced by these cells to be collected and moved around the body later. Notice that you have these cube-shaped cells with nice round nuclei. This is simple cuboidal epithelium, as they would appear in a gland. Lumen in the middle, row of cells anchored to one another by a basement membrane just outside the rim. As a side note, this would be a blood vessel or a capillary. You can kind of notice these flattened nuclei over here, those flattened nuclei of simple squamous epithelial cells lining these blood vessels. But if I showed you this picture on a test or a quiz, I want you to tell me simple cuboidal epithelium. The structure is a single layer of cube-shaped cells, simple, cuboidal. Let's do this. When you tell me about the function of simple cuboidal epithelium, please say secretion, 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 okay? Like in glands, simple cuboidals secrete. And let's ignore the absorption part for now. So tell me that the function is to secrete. And if it's an adrenal gland, they're secreting adrenaline. And if it's a pituitary gland, they're secreting whatever it is, any of the number of chemicals the pituitary is making. And the pancreas, those cuboidal cells are secreting insulin or glucagon. Okay, cube-shaped cells secrete, and that's their job. All right, glands, 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 glands. Secretion happens in glands. So anytime you got that gland, it's going to be made primarily of simple cuboidal tissue, okay, producing enzymes, hormones, and anything else needed elsewhere in the body. This is an example of simple columnar epithelium. Okay. Now, this gets tricky because here is a layer of simple columnar cells, and then down below is the basement membrane. And that hooks around like this. This is all one continuous basement membrane. And it goes up here off the screen and then comes back down right along the bottom of these columnar cells with all of this connective tissue in between, this loose connective smeary stuff in between. Okay. And what this is one of the little villi in your intestines. So intestines have all these villi projections into them that increase the absorptive surface area of the intestine. Okay. So we have tall columnar-shaped cells, nice round nuclei, pretty much right in the middle of the cell. Nice round, maybe oval nuclei. And then simple columnar epithelium have this feature at the top called microvilli. They're tiny little projections of cell membrane that once again serve to increase the absorptive surface area of our intestine cells to make our intestines as efficient as possible for absorbing nutrients. This little thing right there, that is a mucus secreting goblet cell that you saw on the diagram earlier. Down here, this is a mucus secreting goblet cell as well. And there's one right there, that little pocket of mucus about ready to be secreted into the intestines. Okay, simple columnar epithelium. Okay. So these simple columnar epitheliums have some important structural features to them. They are a single layer of columnar-shaped cells, simple columnar. Okay. The nucleus sometimes is slightly elliptical. That means oval. Okay. And it's all the nuclei kind of remain in the same level throughout the tissue. And that's one way that you're going to tell the difference between simple columnar and pseudostratified columnar. Okay. And they might be associated with goblet cells, and those goblet cells are the ones that are producing the mucus. Back up real quick. So here is our simple columnar epithelium. Notice round to elliptical nuclei. All of those nuclei are at the same level, and we have a goblet cell. This diagram shows an up-close view of one of those goblet cells. And look at this fuzzy little microvilli at the top. If you zoom in even closer than this, you can start to see, you've got these fuzzy little projections of cell membrane at the top of these columnar cells. Okay. The function is primarily absorption of the nutrients from the food that is being digested. And secretion, yes, but it's secretion of mucus by the goblet cells. Okay, secretion of mucus by the goblet cells is a primary function, not necessarily secretion of hormones like the cuboidal cells do. This secretion we're going to say is very specific to the goblet cells. Okay. And location for simple columnar is lining of the GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract, starting at the stomach. So the stomach and the small and the large intestine are lined with absorbing simple columnar epithelial cells. Okay. Now, pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Just to get you a frame of reference, up here is our lumen. Down here is our basement membrane. Below is various connective tissues. And heck, there's even some hyaline cartilage here. This tissue sample comes from the trachea. And those cartilaginous rings in the trachea are made up of hyaline cartilage. We've seen this before. That's a side note. Let's take a look at some of the features of these pseudostratified columnars. For starters, the nuclei they look like they're layered. So there's a nucleus, and there's a nucleus, and there's one, and there's one, and there's one, and there's one, which gives this the appearance of being layered. But in all actuality, each and every one of these cells is touching the basement membrane. Each and every one is anchored to the basement membrane. And that's why it's called falsely stratified, pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Notice at the top, this wispy layer, those long wispies are the cilia, and you are going to need some practice to tell the difference between cilia and microvilli. Right now, the biggest thing would be that cilia are typically taller and wispier than those microvilli. And if you see an arrangement of nuclei like this, kind of irregularly shaped nuclei that stacked on top of one each other, that's the best way to tell pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Okay, it is a single layer of column-shaped cells. Nuclei are kind of elliptical or almost irregular. And that appearance of varying distances from the basement membrane is what gives the pseudostratified columnar their name. The pseudostratified columnar is associated with cilia, those long wispies, and also goblet cells. There are goblet cells in pseudostratified columnar. Their function, number one, protection, because those cilia are there to sweep out any debris that gets trapped in the respiratory system. Those pseudostratified columnars protect the respiratory system from infection, bacteria, viruses, anything that might get inhaled. And secretion, once again here, we are talking about secretion that is involved with the goblet cells. Goblet cells secreting mucus in the respiratory system. And that mucus is there to trap harmful things that we inhale with every breath. The location of pseudostratified columnar is in the trachea and the bronchial tubes of the lungs. So places where, are in our respiratory system, trachea and bronchi. All right. And finally, stratified squamous epithelium. Stratified means many layered. Squamous means flat cells. Notice here that this pink stuff from here all the way to here, that is the stratified squamous tissue anchored to a basement membrane. That basement membrane is right there where the color and the texture of the tissue changes. We've got connective tissue below. And look at all of the layers of flattened cells. There might be 24 layers of cells here. Okay. So the structure of stratified squamous is many layers of flattened cells, stratified squamous. And the important feature of stratified squamous is protection. It provides our body's protection from abrasion, pathogens, chemicals, sunlight, dehydration. Okay. And stratified squamous is located anywhere that can come in contact with the outside surface. So your skin, the linings of the mouth and esophagus, rectum, vagina, nasal cavities, not nasal cavities, but the nostrils. Any place that is in contact with the external environment is going to be covered with stratified squamous epithelium. Okay. We will have additional instruction on these items throughout the lab and practice and such. But with these notes, you should be ready to begin epithelial tissues mastery practice at this time. You have 6 attempts. Spread those attempts out. And if you are having trouble identifying those, it takes practice. The first couple times you go through, it's going to be rough. But by the time we are done with the in-class work and the lab and this lecture, which you always have access to, and the epithelial tissues mastery practice, you will get the hang of it. Okay, but you do have to practice. All right, well, this is Mr. Hauser signing off for now, and if I don't see you, I'll see you.